Hi, this is Jacob Kate, and this is my Effective Practices and Assessment Research presentation. So for this presentation, I wanted to focus on a few research-based assessment strategies that can be used in the classroom. I decided to focus on these three strategies, the first one being the Socratic seminar, the second being portfolios, specifically the use of reflection portfolios in the classroom, or simply just reflection as well. And the third, using assessment to model or scaffold lessons to basically model complex processes such as writing an essay. These particular strategies were selected with a language arts or English class in mind, as that is my focus, although they could easily be utilized in other content areas as well, or integrated into an interdisciplinary curriculum. One in particular is the Socratic seminar, which can basically be used in just about any class where you're going to have discussions. So the Socratic seminar is essentially a form of discussion that is really useful for both teachers and students alike. Often teachers get caught up in creating the perfect lesson, lecture, or assignment to assess student understandings when sometimes all you need is to just pose a carefully crafted, open-ended question for discussion. The Socratic seminar is a method of discussion where a general statement or question is continuously discussed and examined and reworked until a claim or assumption stands up to scrutiny and gets closer to some objective truth. So to understand the Socratic seminar, let's first define a few of its characteristics. The first thing I'd like to point out is that the Socratic seminar is not a debate or an argument. No one is trying to prove a point in the Socratic seminar. Everyone is, however, trying to arrive closer to some truth. In the same vein, it is not rhetoric. No one's trying to persuade someone else to their side or to their opinion. No one's trying to prove a point. Essentially, all you're trying to do is arrive at some logically derived truth. And the third thing I'd like to point out is it is a didactic method for discovering truth and questioning assumptions. The reason I include this is that it is essentially just a logical process that is conducive to learning. And it really is the basis of learning, in my opinion, in that you are always questioning your own assumptions and building important critical thinking skills that will really carry over to just about any subject. So there's a couple steps into the Socratic seminar. The first one being that you want to propose a question and an answer. So I've included an example here. What is a zebra? And here's a possible answer that a student might give. Well, it's a simple answer, but it's true nonetheless. A zebra is an animal. But is that as true as we can get? So the second step is that we're going to question our answer and identify exceptions to the answer. Well, a dog is also an animal. Is a dog a zebra? Well, this represents an exception to our original answer. So we have to go back and we have to modify our original answer. No, a dog is not a zebra. And we would, at that point, modify and come up with some better answer for what a zebra is. So step 3 is that we're going to refine our answer and repeat until we get to as close to the truth as we can possibly get. So we might say that a zebra is an animal that resembles a horse. Well, is a zebra a horse? Well, no, a zebra is not a horse. And so I included this last one as my best attempt to come up with a concise definition of what a zebra is. And so a zebra is an animal native to the African savanna that is known for its distinctive black and white striped patterned coat. And obviously we could take that statement and further extrapolate exceptions and more details and arrive even closer to the truth of what the essence of what a zebra actually is. So there's some really useful applications of this. The first one is that it aids in reading comprehension. Now, this might be a slightly minor side effect of it, but I think it's important to remember that everybody in a class is at different levels and may interpret text differently. This allows students to freely exchange ideas and opinions in an open setting, and allows for everybody to kind of discuss and get closer to what the text means. And especially students that struggle with the readings or struggle with comprehension, having these classroom discussions really help. Another thing that it does is that it models critical thinking skills and discussion techniques. It essentially encourages students to clarify what they know. We used a really simple example before with the zebra, but as you'll see in just a second, that there are some more really open-ended questions that we can pose and put through the Socratic seminar. So one of the really great things that you can apply to Socratic seminar to are ethics questions, questions of morality, and philosophical questions. So if you're discussing the theme of a text, or if you're discussing some concept that you'd like to define further, such as what is justice, or what is beauty, or what is any abstract concept, you may intrinsically feel that you know the answer to that question. But when you go to actually think about how you would define that or put that into words, it becomes much more difficult. And using these sorts of seminars forces students to think critically about their own assumptions and how they would define their own assumptions or put them down into words. And doing that also causes them to reevaluate themselves and their own personal identity. So it really leads to some great discussions and some kind of soul searching, if you will. So the next one that I'd like to get into is the use of portfolios in the classroom. I wanted to focus on reflections portfolios. Reflections are really important in language arts because they basically lead students to reflect on their thoughts. Just like you would in the Socratic seminar, you're going to want to evaluate the things that you were thinking while you were reading a text or anything like that. So just as students refine and change their assumptions through discussions, they can also refine and clarify their own thoughts and identity through reflection. So some benefits of student reflection assessments are that students are able to clarify their own reader-writer identity. You can pose questions for reflection such as, did you enjoy the text? What was your least favorite part or favorite part? Do you enjoy this type of writing? These types of questions cause students to evaluate their own personal identity as a reader and a writer. The second benefit of them would be that students can identify what they learn from the text in their own terms. So rather than being dictated what something means or how they should feel about something, giving students an opportunity to reflect on what they've read gives them a voice in the educational process and sort of engages them in their own educational journey. And finally, students, speaking of being engaged, students become actively engaged rather than just passively observing. When they're reading a text or sitting through a discussion, unless they're actively participating in that discussion, they may just be listening, or they may just be going through the motions and reading the text. By getting them to do assessments that are focused on reflection, they have to actively become engaged in the process and think about their own thoughts, essentially. So using reflections in a portfolio or a journal or a log, or as it was in the scholarly article that I referenced in this, a daybook. So a daybook or a journal could be used to record student reflections using guided questions if you'd like, or simply just asking students to collect their thoughts, musings, questions, analyses, opinions, and arguments, whatever they decide is important enough to write down. They're also useful because they show growth, just as any portfolio would, and they could also be useful regardless of literacy level. since you're not going to be grading it for grammar or content necessarily, you're just basically going to be looking at it as a formative assessment to determine where a student really is. On the right, I've included an outline of one sort of daybook assignment that was included in the article. It's pretty interesting, where you could where the students are required to not only write reflections but also go and give an oral presentation of their own reflections in retrospect, and kind of relook at their reflections and assess themselves. So it's pretty useful for that as well. And so the last one that I want to go over is using assessment to model effective techniques, such as writing techniques. So generally we refer to this as scaffolding, but I think it's a little bit more complex than that, since scaffolding is simply just breaking it up, whereas modeling is essentially looking at the big picture. So scaffolding is essentially temporary assistance provided to students as they complete a task. One example of scaffolding, one famous one that everybody pretty much is familiar with, is the 5-paragraph essay. So once you have learned how to write the 5-paragraph essay, the hope is that you can remove those supports, and you won't have to focus on the scaffolding techniques of writing a 5-paragraph essay. You'll just consider the skills that you learned in writing that essay. But there are some pitfalls to this as well. So I'm going to read this quote. Instead of viewing the 5-paragraph essay as temporary assistance forming one part of an instructional process that might help students to decide how to organize their own writing, some teachers see master of the 5-paragraph formula as the goal upon which students are evaluated. So the 5-paragraph essay should not be the goal, it should be the means by which students improve their writing skills. So I wanted to include a specific example of a lesson that you could scaffold to model, say, a narrative writing assignment. So you could start the first day with brainstorming. You can include some sort of assessment, graphic organizer, a discussion, even a Socratic seminar. The second day you might have a graphic organizer, or they might work in groups in another sort of assessment setting to plan theme, characters, and setting, further planning, conflict, resolution, conclusion, essentially breaking up the important parts and scaffolding them so that they can see how the planning process works for approaching an essay or a narrative assignment. They would go into writing a rough draft after all that is complete. And then they would submit that to peer review, which is another step in the writing process. And then the final draft would be turned in. At each step along the way, they would receive feedback from the instructor. And they would also be given instruction as to what the big picture is, where this fits in, and be given constant feedback and guidance and practice as well to basically model effective writing techniques. So I hope you enjoyed those techniques. I thought that they were really useful for language arts class, but also any class in general. I appreciate you giving this a watch, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your college careers here.